Amanda, thanks so much for joining the We Rise podcast. Really delighted to have you on today. Will you introduce yourself so folks know who I have the delight of speaking to today?
Yeah, I'm Amanda Workman-Scott. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the West Virginia Community Development Hub.
Great. And would love to hear a little bit more about the hub and the work you do and even how you work with communities, the approach you take.
So the Hub is a statewide nonprofit organization. Our main office is in Charleston, but we have folks all across the state right now. I'm here from Stonewood in Harrison County. And the Hub is really focused on community engagement and leadership development, and we do all of that work on the ground in communities. So it's really helping community members see that they do have the capacity to do the work and help build that capacity and help build the leadership skills that they need to continue that work. A lot of times we hear communities say, well, I want this or we need this, but they don't really feel like they have the power or the knowledge, or I don't know what it is to make the change.
Yeah.
And so when I get to work with communities on the ground, I'm like, no, you can make this change. And some of you are already making that change. You don't realize it yet. So.
Totally. And Amanda, can you say a little bit more? I mean, that moment is so powerful for community members when they go from this is not possible, or I can't do this to, okay, well, where do I start? Or what's the first step? What do you think creates that change in people to allow them to engage and to start creating change?
I think the first part is people just coming to the table and having a conversation and really being honest and being open to hearing what other people are saying and being open to working with each other. And a lot of these communities, we grew up there. This is where we've lived and we know the history, and it's kind of just, it's being open to everyone, right? And saying, okay, yeah, you want to do a community garden? Like, I can help with that. Let's make it work. And here are the other people that we need to talk to. And it's also about those early wins. So if folks can do something as easy as plan a community cleanup, and they can see that starting to happen monthly, and they see new people coming out each time, it kind of kickstarts this momentum that just starts rolling.
Yeah.
That people are like, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, totally. So how do communities find the hub? How do you, I already know the answer is not, but for folks who might not be familiar with the hub, is it an approach that you say, hey folks, this is something you need to do? Or do communities come to the hub to engage? How do you, that entry point with communities, talk us through what that looks like?
Yeah, it kind of works both ways. So we have our programs, and if we have a program open, we'll kind of look at the communities around the state, talk to our partners about this is what the program's about, what communities do you feel like would be a good fit. And so that's one approach. Sometimes communities can actually apply to be part of our program. So sometimes there's an open application. And then a lot of the times, it's happening a lot right now, we have communities reach out to us and say, hey, I saw the great work you were doing in Grafton. Like, can we do something similar here? And we don't always have the funding to offer the support, maybe the level of support that's needed, but we do the responsive coaching and kind of help people at least take those first initial steps and kind of help get them started. And then they kind of just go into our pipeline of communities. When we do have an open program, we can then say, oh, well, we hadn't thought about this community. What if they were a good fit for it? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can tell me a little bit more about the responsive coaching. What does that look like? And how does it work?
So that's when a community is like, it could be an individual, it could be a group of people, but someone's like, I want to work on this project, or maybe I'm going to run this meeting, but I'm not really a great facilitator. I don't know how to create an agenda, or whatever it may be. Someone can reach out to us directly, or they can actually go through the website and we'll get a notice that we have someone that would like to speak with us. So that's one way. We also have our new Kickstart program that just rolled out in June. And that is, I like to think of it as like a choose your own adventure book.
Cool.
So we have chapters, and I think it'll have more information that's coming to it. So we have the initial chapter up, but folks can learn, well, how do I get started? If I want to do this work, how can I get started? And then they can go through the lessons at their own pace. So if they can only do one lesson a month, that's fine. If they're only interested in one lesson or a couple lessons, that's okay too. And if someone chooses to go through the Kickstart program or pieces of it and they get stuck, they can ask for coaching support so they can have access to one of our community coaches.
Awesome. What a great resource, both from a learning standpoint, but also have, the resources of people there. How would a community member who, isn't quite sure? So some of the communities I've worked with, there have been, as in every community, the naysayers. There have been people who have said it's not possible, it's not worth creating change. And then there have been folks who said, well, let's just try, let's see what happens. And obviously, very often tension arises there. How does the hub, how do you work with communities where that happens, or where there's kind of a desire to do something different, but then the old ways, and people are maybe afraid of something new and that comes in, and maybe their way of life being lost? How do you address some of those challenges, or kind of, I wouldn't say anchors, because it's not an anchor in the community, but it can be something that can keep a community from moving forward? What does that look like?
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah.
I've seen it in even my own volunteer work that I do through a farmers market, but it's like I said, the first step in everything that we do at the hub is a conversation. So it's a conversation with the people in the community. It can be a group conversation, an individual conversation, but really getting to know the folks in the community. And we definitely see the naysayers and see, well, this is how it's always been and it's not going to change. And that's okay. Like, maybe they're just not ready to be at the table yet, and that's okay. So we work with the folks that are ready to make that change and help move forward, but we always encourage the community members, well, we need to keep going back to folks and saying, just informing them of this is what's happening and this is how we were able to do this. Do you want to be part of this? And keep inviting them to be part of it. Mm-hmm. And most of the time you will see those folks be like, oh, I want to do that. Or they have their own idea and they'll come to the table and say, well, can you help me with this project? I saw what you guys were able to do with this. So it's all about communication is really what it comes down to. And just keep putting it back in front of people and saying, this is what we're doing. We're not asking you for anything. We just want you to see what we're doing and the change that we're making in the community. Yeah. And you're always welcome to be at the table.
Yeah, I love that. Keeping that open invitation there. I also heard you say earlier, building momentum, having those small wins when you get going, having folks learn from each other, and continuing to say that it's okay for there to be naysayers, for not everybody has to come to the table, but the table continues to have a place set for new folks, if you will. What are some other,
and sometimes,
go for it.
One more thing on that. Sometimes it is good to have an outside organization come in. So when the hub starts in a new community, maybe they've been having the conversation, but it's always the same people. But when the hub comes in as an outsider, people are like, well, what's the hub? What are they all about? And they want to come out and hear and get to learn what we're talking about too. So sometimes that'll pull some new people in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about when you come in, or other hub folks come in as a coach or a facilitator, what are ways that you start to build relationships with people and start to build trust? What do those early moments look like in new engagement with communities, which are so sensitive?
Yeah, they are. So we normally have a connection to the community, whether it's through a partner or maybe a community member reached out, or I would say it's rarely that we go into a community completely blind. Mm-hmm. But it really starts with those individual conversations. So the first thing I like to do with my key contacts in the community is say, okay, make me a list of the leaders in your community, the stakeholders in your community, the people working in these different areas. So I want to talk to folks in education and healthcare, across the board. Who are your local officials? And we start with those individual conversations. And some of that is done virtually, but a lot of that, it helps if you actually go to the community. Sure. And you're in that community, in their space, talking about what's going on there and kind of trying to learn the history a little bit. And then we like to bring we like to start out with a smaller meeting. So maybe it's only about 15 to 20 people where we're still learning about the community. And for me personally, it's funny because we just had a partner conversation, like how do we build those relationships with the hub staff? Um, and I find for me is building the relationship, it I like to get to know a person. Like I like to get to know, like, what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah.
Or do you have kids? Or what's your family life like? And it's more than just like knowing the community, it's knowing the individuals and the community. And I'm okay with releasing some of that information too. So it's a two-way street. And that I feel like is how I've been able to really build those strong relationships in the communities and build the trust in those communities. I've been in one community for 8 years now, and it's, I can call Tom anytime during the day and just have a conversation with him. It doesn't even have to be about anything that's going on in the community. So that's been it's been helpful in the work. And I always tell my executive director, I have a tendency to get like emotionally attached to the community. So,
Yes.
but I think it's good to be open like
Yeah,
that.
totally.
Yeah.
Then what does it look like on the other end after you've worked in a community for a long time and it's time to move on? I'll say that what you just said resonates so strongly for me. I start to, in long-term engagement, folks start to be like family. You know about their kids or their grandkids, or if someone has surgery, you start to learn about what keeps them up at night and what they're excited about, or kind of where the sensitive relationships are. And so what does that look like after you've worked for a community for a long time and it's time to move on? What
Yeah.
happens there?
Yeah, so one of the first things we tell a community is we are going to be here as long as you want us here.
Mm-hmm.
We may not always be in a program, but we are going to be here to support you as long as you want us here. And so that's this one community that I'm talking about. That's how it's been. We've been engaged deeper at times and then a little bit less at other times. And there's an opportunity that's come up that I was like, why don't we try to re-engage this community in one of these programs? Because it felt like it was needed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, I think, it's on the community coach. So I was a community coach for that community. And I have said, you know what, I am kind of too deep in the community now that I actually don't feel like I'm the right coach.
Uh-huh.
Now, if they still want me as part at the table as part of the conversation, I'm happy to do that. But I don't feel like it's right for me to be the coach. So I think it's two-sided. It's the community saying, yes, we still want you there, or no, maybe it's time to move on. And then it's the coach recognizing, I've been in this community for 8 years and I'm like part of the community now. Maybe I shouldn't be their coach.
Right. It takes self-awareness and a sense of wisdom to be able to say that to some degree. So, Amanda, I love the way that you've outlined the way that the hub engages with communities, the way you've connected with folks. Tell us a little bit more about you. What's your background and what keeps you excited these days, and all that 2020 and 2021 has brought?
Yeah. So I grew up in West Virginia, went to WVU. I moved away the second I graduated from college. I was away for about 10 years. And I was living in Richmond and kind of going through a couple of transitions, hard transitions. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And Kent Spellman, who was friends with my parents, he was like, he's the one who said, what do you think about community development? I said, I don't know. I don't really know what you're talking about. And at the time I was working in higher education, and he talked about it and he said, we have this position at the hub. And I was like, okay. I actually didn't think I was going to move home to West Virginia. That wasn't really in my plans, but I applied and I eventually got it, and it was the best move that I made. I got really involved in the Bridgeport Farmers Market. My parents founded the Bridgeport Farmers Market 12 years ago, so helping to continue that work. And then I met my husband, and we have 3 wonderful children, all boys. And so I've been with the hub for 8 years. This is my 8th year, and it's hard work. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And it's funny because my husband's like, you're not going to be happy if you're not doing it. He said you love it too much.
Yeah.
And he's right. I do. I love it too much. Um, and it's like seeing my community members and seeing when the light bulb goes off and seeing them be successful and keeping the work going even after we're not necessarily there every day. That's what keeps me going. And also my kids. Like, I know that I never thought I was going to come home. I think it's okay if my kids want to leave West Virginia someday, but I want them to always think of West Virginia as their home. And I want them to always at least come back and visit, and bring their kids here too, or stay, hopefully. So that's really what it is. And then my work with the farmers market, the vendors they're part of my family too. It's great work. That's my food side of the work.
Yeah. Awesome.
So.
Will you talk a little bit more, Amanda, about when you talk about your three boys, wanting them to have a sense of home in West Virginia? Can you say a little bit more about why that's important to you?
Yeah. So I've lived in 3 other places, all big cities. I lived in St. Louis, Chicago, and Richmond. And you don't, at least I didn't get the sense of community while I was in those places. I had good friends. It was fun. I loved living in all 3 places, but you don't have that sense of community. It didn't feel like home. And so I feel like in West Virginia, even if you're not from West Virginia and you move here, or even if you're just here visiting, I've heard people say so many times, the people are amazing. They're wonderful. Like, yes, we have great mountains and beautiful scenery, but it's the people in West Virginia. And for me, that's what I mean with home. It's we have a sense of community here. And I can call one of my neighbors at any point and say, I need help, and they're going to be right there. And I didn't get that in the other places that I lived. So that's what I want for my boys. I want them to have that sense of home.
Absolutely. And that's something that you can't cook up in a recipe. That has to be, true and real and rooted and something that is lived. So that's, yeah, really beautiful. And have heard much the same, people speak with such love in their hearts about folks in West Virginia. As I mentioned to you before we started, I grew up in the Eastern Panhandle and my husband's from Charleston, and there's a sense of expansiveness and joy when, people talk about other folks from West Virginia. So really neat to hear you talk about that. So when you think a little bit more either about the arc of your time moving back to West Virginia and your time at the hub, or just in the work that you've done in communities and in the region, what changes have you seen, Amanda? What has resilience looked like either in your own life or communities, and what big or small changes have you noticed over time?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, especially over the last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with the communities that I've worked with long term, it's the folks that, yeah, maybe we've hit a roadblock, but they're willing to say, maybe we need to take a break, and that's okay. Like, we can take a break, but then they're willing to come back eventually and say, okay, I want to try it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key. I understand we all need to step away sometimes. And I tell all of my community members that, like, I want you here, but if you need to take a break, just talk to me about it and take the break, like, take what you need. And we talk about that at the staff with our own hub staff too. So I think that's the key. And the last year has, most of our work has always been done in person. So trying to figure out how to do community meetings and community engagement when you can't be in person was definitely a struggle. Mm-hmm. But I also see that it's opened a lot of doors too, because so in the winter time, sometimes our work dies down a little bit because of the weather sometimes. Mm-hmm. So now we know, well, we can actually host a community meeting virtually. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that the work has to stop just because of the weather or whatever it may be at the time. But yeah, I think it's the key. The key is just like giving people the space to just be, like, and to feel the way that they're feeling. So if I can't be involved right now, that's fine. It doesn't mean that we're like, okay, Amanda can't be involved anymore, so she's done for good. No, it's just giving her the space to do what she needs to do, right? Um, and that's for the communities that have been doing the work long term. That's what I've seen.
Yeah. And it sounds like meeting people where they are too. And
Yeah.
is saying that out loud something that you often do? Letting people know it's okay if you need to step away and come back. Do you find that that's
Yeah.
important? Actually verbalizing that? Yeah.
Yep. Some of the first things I tell communities, first of all, I'm not here to do the work for you. I do
Mhm.
not live in your community. I don't know what your community needs, and I don't want to tell you what your community needs. So I will be here to work alongside you and help support you, but it's up to you all to make the decisions and to actually do the work. And
Mhm.
then I also say, I ask for 5 core team members, but I understand that you all have your own lives and you're running businesses, working, have a family, whatever it is. And it's okay if you need to step away. I just need you to communicate that with me and with the rest of the team. If we can have an open line of communication, we're going to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So key in so many ways. So you talked a little bit about, people who might be visiting West Virginia or from West Virginia or coming back. When you think about creating a sense of belonging, and when you think about the communities you work with and your own experience, what have you found helps create a sense of belonging within communities, either new folks who are coming or folks who have been there, and to grow and be strong? I know that's a point of tension for a lot of communities is, folks who have been there for 10 generations or 5 generations and someone who moves in and might not feel like they are welcome. How have you seen communities create a sense of welcoming in an authentic
Yeah.
way for folks? Feel free to go in
Yeah.
whatever direction you want to with that question.
Um, I've seen some communities, it, I mean, most of the time, what I've seen when people feel the most welcome is when somebody actually reaches out to them. So, like, for one example, is one of my community members owns a coffee shop, and I know that anytime someone walks in there, he's always like, he asks your name and wants to know more about you, and he remembers you the next time you come in. And I've
Mhm.
seen that in other places across the state too. So it's like just being open for dialogue. Um, I will say, I do think sometimes that West Virginians are really hard on newcomers, right?
Mhm.
On people, outsiders, people that we don't know.
Mhm.
Um, but and I think it's kind of okay. Like, we're just wanting to get to know you a little bit. We're being, a little bit hesitant, and I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But also knowing that in the end we are going to be open and welcome you into the group. Um, I had something else there and I forgot what it was. Oh, I also understand that, and I just had this conversation with a couple of the communities. Um, so we are seeing a lot more visitors in some parts of the state, right, since last year. And we're talking a lot about tourism and the importance of tourism for our state. And I think that that is amazing. And as I was talking to my groups, I said, I think it's great that we're talking about tourism and what our visitors need. But I said, we got to look at the other side too and think about our community members and the people that want to live here and have lived here their entire lives and are raising their families here and who are retiring here, and think about what they need. And there's got to be a balance here. And I think that since the last year happened, that's something that we're all still figuring out, is
Mhm.
how do we balance that and make sure that our residents, the people that want to be here living in West Virginia, can be happy and fulfilled and have what they need. And then how can our visitors have that same thing?
Yeah,
And I don't have
absolutely.
the answer to that,
Yeah.
but it's something that we have to be thinking about.
Yeah. It's so key, and also kind of related to that, I hear a lot of folks push back against tourism. Tourism, I think, is key in so many ways, and outdoor recreation and agritourism, all the things. But how have you seen communities successfully build jobs in the tourism sector that are truly sustaining for individuals or families? Have you seen any good examples?
Um, I've seen where some communities, there's been new businesses that have opened up. So it's been people that have lived in the community and um, maybe lost their job or just were still looking to do something different that now have been able to open businesses.
Mhm.
And that's just been in the last couple of years. So that's where I've seen the most growth is like maybe it's a young person or even someone that is just retired that's like, what I really want to do is just open my own business. And
Mhm.
it's in some of the places I see where the kids are in there are also supporting and, helping run the business too. There's a whole family effort.
Yeah.
And a lot of those businesses are around tourism. So
Mhm.
that's what I've seen the most.
So it sounds like new opportunities so much, not,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I love the whole family. So, so moving away from kind of the individual sector, if you zoom out to the 10,000-foot level, Amanda, and think about either communities you work with or the broader region or the state, where have you seen points of resilience, and what has allowed or catalyzed communities to change and grow for the better, or kept communities from changing and held them back? Feel free to go either way there.
Um, I think something that's kept some communities from moving forward is just this fear of change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's that same saying, like, this is the way it's always been, and this is how it's gonna always be. And it maybe the first time or the first couple of times that we try to work in that community or a partner tries to work in that community, it doesn't work. But I think it's important to keep trying to re-engage in that community because I do believe that at some point it will work. You just have to keep, maybe it's just not the right time, right? And so I think in the places where it has worked are the places where they're ready for the change, or there's at least people in the community that are ready for the change. Um, in some cases, they don't know that they're ready for the change, but if you
Right.
have the
Yeah.
conversation and they're open to talking,
Yeah.
that's when it's like, oh, maybe we are ready for the
Yeah.
change, or maybe the change is already happening and they didn't even realize it.
Sure.
Um, so I see both sides all across the state. Um, but again, I think it just comes back to that like being open. And I know in our conversations, like we want to talk about all the good things, but it's also giving people the space to talk about the challenging things and the things that they don't like in their community. Um, so it's finding the folks that are really ready for that change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so can you walk us through a little bit more about what working in a community, what does that actually look like? What are some of the programs of the hub, or what are some of the favorite ways that you like to engage with communities? And what does that change look like? Are you rewriting communities? I know you're not, but what does that change day to day or month by month, year by year look like?
Yeah, so most of our programs are the way that we run them are very similar in the way that we have a community coach that works with the community. In our entry level program, it's more about working with the entire community and just really working on that engagement piece. And then in our intermediate and then our advanced programs, it looks more about working with a core set of folks in the community that are kind of building out the project, but there's community engagement touch points throughout the program. And so all of our communities have a community coach. It's funny because I think some people think that the hub has like 30 community coaches. We actually only have 4 community coaches on staff.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so so there is a capacity level that we have
Sure.
there, that there's a ceiling.
Yeah.
um, we push ourselves, but so each community has a community coach. We go into the communities and host community meetings and workshops every single month. We also like to bring, each community has, or each program has probably, well, at least the 2 upper level ones have like 5 to 6 communities as part of it. And we like to bring the communities together for peer learning as well. That is a huge part of it, is they need to be talking to each other, and they make those connections and start collaborating with each other across the board too. It's also connecting those communities with past communities that have already graduated from those programs. So being like, so this is what Buchanan's been able to do over the 10 years that they've been able to do this work. The coach is also there to just remind communities that, yes, we want change to happen tomorrow, but it doesn't happen like that, right? Like big change takes 3, 5, 10 years to happen. So that's why we have to keep coming to the table and keep putting in the time for the work and keep engaging new people. So yeah, it's the individual community coaching. It's trying to engage the broader community, trying to help them recruit volunteers, building their leadership skills, their leadership development, also working with our partners and bringing in other resources. So the hub's really great at recognizing, like, maybe we're not experts in that, but let's bring in our partner to bring in some of that technical assistance for you.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about what types of technical assistance you have found to be helpful in communities? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the types of technical assistance, I mean, community coaching could be considered technical assistance. So a lot of time it's just that community coaching. Sometimes it's been, they need like some design work done or engineer work done. A lot of communities need feasibility studies, or maybe they want a comp plan. Sometimes it's just like they're working through some accounting issues, or it could be some legal support, those kinds of things. We've been lucky in this past year that we've been able to engage with some universities and start working with some students. And so that's been cool.
Yeah.
I love that piece of it, because a lot of the times the students are not from West Virginia. And so they get to, especially when they're able to travel to the communities, they get to really experience the state that they're going to school in. And really, my hope is always that they want to stay here and get a job here. So that's been really cool to see over the last year. It's kind of grown.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you talked a little bit earlier, Amanda, about peer learning. And that's something, I've heard a lot of communities express a desire for, or when they've been able to do it, you can't really replicate the value that peer learning offers. What does that actually look like? How do you facilitate communities learning from each other in the short term and in the long term?
Yeah, so through our program work, we're planning a group session for this fall, actually, for 5 of our communities. And we're talking about bringing them to a community that was part of a past program. And that way they get to learn from that community. So it's also supporting the past community too. It's showing, like, so when we get there, we want to make sure that you guys can do a tour, like a learning journey through the community, and show off what you all have been able to do, and kind of talk about your journey and the challenges that you faced and all of that. And then during that group session, we have a lot of networking time for the communities to talk to each other. We like to split, each community has a team of folks that come. So we like to split up those teams and get them interacting with each other in that way. We've done like the Strengths Finders test before, just to see like different personalities and different characteristics throughout the groups. So we like to mix it up that way as well. So that's what we've done in a lot of our programs. And sometimes it's just like a community coming to us and saying, this is what I want to do, but I don't know how to do it. And we can say, oh, well, you need to talk to Karen in so-and-so community because she was successful in that. And you two, it would be good for you two to connect. So a lot of the time, the hub is just that connector to the partner or peer learning community.
Yeah. And which is, of course, one reason the hub is so well respected throughout the broader region for the sensitive approach that is taken with communities. So I guess one technical question, maybe technical, is do you take communities from community to community, hop on the bus and learn, or is it really more gathering of people in one place?
We have not done, I would call that a learning journey, and we have not done that. I know we've done it with funders and partners before, but that would be really cool if we were able to do that. We have in our programs, we do try to, like, for our group sessions, we try to go to a different community each time. So it's not like we're always hosting the group session in the same part of the state every single time. But we also have to think about, I'm thinking about our one program, we have folks spread out across the state. So
Yeah.
it's like, if it's going to take someone 4 hours to get to one space, yeah, so we got to think
Long
about
drive.
that too. We
Yeah.
always try to meet in the middle
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah. Makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Makes sense. So, you've talked a little bit about your, work in the farmers market space and in food. Tell us a little bit more about what makes you excited, Amanda, that, either work that's happening in your own community or professionally, personally, what brings you joy these days in what you see?
Yeah. Well, the farmers market definitely brings me joy. I am there every single Sunday from May through October, and like I said, it's like a family reunion every single Sunday.
Mm,
But it's a community event. We've turned it into, it's bigger than a farmers market. We have music. We have a food truck that comes. We have artisans. It's a good time, and it's
mm,
3 hours every single Sunday. So that gives me a lot of joy. So I live in Stonewood, and it's a community of about 1,200 people. It's mostly residential, and they're about to celebrate. Stonewood is a community that used to be two separate communities that came together, and so that coming together, they're about to celebrate 75 years. And I told my husband the other day, I said, I'm thinking about joining the committee to plan the celebration.
that's awesome.
He kind of looks at me like, you don't have time to do that. And I'm like, yeah, but I feel like I need to get involved in my own
Right.
community, like where I live. And I said, I'm involved in all the other communities through my work, but like, what about my own
Yeah.
community? So I'm still figuring that out. I do some of it through the farmers market, but it's also just finding that balance of, we also have to practice what we preach. We tell communities all the time, you need to get involved. And I tell my community coaches, I was like, you all need to get involved in your own communities.
Right. Right. But it's real.
Yeah.
It's real. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. And so, when you think about folks who are wondering whether to get involved in a community development organization or in coaching or in learning, or just, everyday folks, what key lessons learned would you share, Amanda, with others who are trying to create change in their communities or at the regional level?
I would just say that you can do it. If you have an idea, it just start by reaching out to individuals and having conversations. So maybe you reach out to me first, and maybe I'm not the right person to talk to, but most likely I'm going to say, oh, but you should talk to Stacy or whoever it is. I think that's the key is like, if you have an idea, and even if it's not like you haven't fully thought it through, that's okay. But if you have an idea and you have the passion to actually move it forward, just start calling people and setting up meetings. I mean, if you sit in your house and you just keep thinking about it, nothing's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to start talking to people. And also, I would say start learning or researching, like, where has this happened, or has this idea happened somewhere else? And maybe it hasn't taken place in West Virginia, but we can learn from other places too, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I just think, like, don't be scared to just call somebody and say, even if it's a cold call, and say, hey, I have this idea. Do you have a few minutes that we can talk? And that's the first step.
Yeah. So yeah, just having someone to be able to be there and reach out to. So when you think
Yeah.
about your own work, what do you wish someone had told you 5 or 10 years ago? Maybe before you started being a community coach, or maybe in your work with the market. What are some things that you can offer to other communities that maybe you wish you had heard some years ago?
But it's really hard work, but it's, um, if you stick with it and you're passionate about it, it's worth it. Also, it's okay to get burnt out. Like, we all do, and it's okay to say, I need a break. And I think people need to hear that over and over and over again. Um, and also that there's this whole network of folks out here doing this work, and we just all need to connect and do a better job of it. So, yeah, those are probably the three biggest things for me. Um, I I've told folks this before. I used to, when I was in Richmond, I worked with adult students, and now I'm working with community members. And I was like, actually, the work's not that much different.
Mm.
Um, of course, I was working more with individuals, and now I'm working with like teams of folks, but the work is very similar, and we're all just trying to make change, whether it's individual, like internal change, or if it's, in the community. That's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're thinking about creating that change, I was wondering, how does the hub draw inspiration from others? Is there a cohort of broader organizations that the hub is learning from and doing peer learning with? And can you tell us a little bit more about what helps sustain you and helps sustain the hub's work to stay engaged in what is really hard work, meaningful but hard work?
Yeah. Yeah. So we do have a community development network that we kind of help facilitate, and that's partners, organizations, everyone from across the state that come together. And we have a steering committee that kind of helps guide that a little bit. So we have that. I would also say our community members and all the communities that we've worked in are part of that network. And yeah, it's the community members and the organizations, and our partners, and then within the hub staff, it's we lean on each other a lot, and lean on each other to make those connections outside of our network and bring in new people. So yeah, it's all of that. It's the community development network, though, is a group of amazing people that are doing this work, and it's cool. We all, like, everybody's doing this amazing work, but we're not always great at communicating what we're doing. So it's making sure that we're not duplicating things, but that we're working together and working with the communities that need the support.
Yeah, awesome. And how do you, you talked about community burnout a little bit. How does the hub find ways to lean on each other or to address burnout in ways that, can help sustain yourselves and sustain the work? What forms of personal resilience have been helpful to you or to other team members at the hub?
Yeah. So we have definitely encouraged folks, especially through this summer, to, like, if you need to take a day off, take a day off. Like, look at your calendar and insert those days now, because we know our calendars fill up quickly. So really encouraging people to do that. We're also really great at just saying, like, maybe I had a really busy morning and I just need to take the afternoon, or because I want to take my kids to the pool, or whatever it may be. We have a great leadership team at the hub. It's kind of like a shared leadership model. And we know that our coaches and our staff members, we want them to be happy in this work and want them to want to be doing this work. And so there's got to be a work-life balance there. So I feel like we're always talking about it. And especially for my coaching team, if I see some folks, I'm like, listen, I need you to take a day off, or I need you to take the morning off and go do yoga, or go get a massage, or go take a walk, go do something. Right. And we're very open with each other about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps everyone when we can lean on each other like that. Yeah. Well said. So, Amanda, as we get ready to close, what other thoughts or reflections would you like to share about your own work or the hub's work or the communities that you're working with in West Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, the hub wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our communities. So we have an amazing state. We have amazing people that are living here that want to make change in the state. And so we just all have to keep working together and moving that forward. And I'm just happy to be part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love bring the joy that you bring, in the way you describe it and what you're doing. And can you share the name of the farmers market? Is it the Stonewood Farmers Market, or does it have another name? Are you willing to share the name of it?
Yeah, it's the Bridgeport Farmers Market. So I grew up in Bridgeport, and that's where my parents still live. I mean, it's just a few miles down the road, but yeah, it's the Bridgeport Farmers Market.
Awesome. You may have some more visitors come by. So, Amanda, thank you so much for such a rich conversation today. So great to hear about how you work with communities, but also those specific, tangible ways that folks can engage work through the hard stuff, build momentum, have small wins, and also, engage in self-care and things that bring yourself joy. So really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining the
Oh, thank
podcast.
you.